Hello, I'm militaryHow and this is Does Logistics Matter? A podcast on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics. Answering yes to the question today is Gabe Sganga, Head of Commercial Growth at Forterra. In this episode, we talk about the current and future state of autonomous transportation, what commercial logistics can learn from the military, how on- and off-road autonomous vehicles can improve logistics operations like yard management and drayage, and as Gabe says in this episode, amateurs think tactics, professionals think logistics. Please enjoy my conversation with Gabe Sganga. Hi Gabe, welcome to the show.
Hi Martijn, very nice to meet you and great to be here.
The first question of the podcast is always the same question, and that question is, does logistics matter?
Yeah, it absolutely matters. I think logistics is the backbone of our global economy, and it is the engine that makes it run. Logistics is the unsung hero that ensures that goods and services are able to go where they need to go, so that your Amazon or DHL or UPS or FedEx packages all end up where they're supposed to, when they're supposed to.
Yeah.
If not, you wind up in a situation where you're waiting for things, or we wind up in a situation like we did during COVID when you had all of these massive freight ships that were hove to off of coasts, waiting to be unloaded, and the impacts kind of ripple through the supply chain, whether it's masks, sanitizing fluids, or other things that are supposed to be kind of traveling through the global supply chain. It can have these kind of knock-on consequences all the way down to end users, whether it's they can't get toilet paper, or they just can't get access to the things that they want or need to drive their businesses. So logistics is one of the kind of critical differentiators between success and failure, also in military operations. There's a famous quote that, amateurs think tactics and professionals think logistics.
Oh, and I like that one.
It is one of the truest things that applies to every endeavor, not just military, but if you're not thinking about how to operate, the things you need to operate, and how to optimize the usage and the supply of those things, whether it's push, whether it's pull, whether it's pre-positioned logistics, you're going to fail because you just haven't been prepared. And when the supply chain that underpins all of those things is brittle, the way that it is globally today, all of these cracks and fissures are the kind of things that we need to work really hard to shore up in all of the places that we can. And I think autonomy is one of those places. As you think about kind of how goods move and where you can optimize fleets, freight handlers, cargo handlers, ports, they're always looking for opportunities to be a little bit more efficient, because those little efficiency gains have tremendous ripple effects across their entire enterprise. And that's what we think autonomy will provide in that space. For me at Forterra, it's why, we're focused on the commercial logistics space because we think it's pretty critical. And it's also why, in the military space that, we come from, we're focused on autonomous ground resupply. We do the same things. The off-highway spaces are where a lot of our kind of nation and global trade runs, whether that's in ports, or the intermodals when you're going from railhead to warehousing, transloading facilities, all of the distribution centers. Those are places that are kind of ripe for autonomy today. And that's where you can implement, those controls and mitigations that allow you to move faster on your journey to autonomy, and really to ensure that global freight logistics, that everything is running. The global supply chain, I don't think there's a day goes by in somebody's life where they don't use something from all of the massive trading partners that are out there, whether it be the US, China, European nations, everything that, you touch has a component from somewhere there, or it's been through their freight ecosystem.
It's said that 90% of the goods that you see around you have been in a container. So, and if they've been in a container, it means they've been from one continent to the other, and sometimes they've gone one way and then back before you've had them.
Yes, and I think technology has such a critical role to play in how we manage and optimize the supply chain. If you're shipping a vintage Porsche across the ocean from a port of embarkation in, say Rotterdam, as
Mm-hmm.
one of my, good friends did. And he said, how do I track this thing? I said, well, you work with a reputable shipper, you keep tabs on it, and you put a few Apple
Yeah.
AirTags
Yeah.
in it,
Yeah.
and one of them will tell you where it is at some point when it surfaces again. I bring that up because his experience was unique and interesting. He watched his Apple AirTags bob off the coast of the Atlantic seaboard in the port of Baltimore for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks before the
Wow.
container ship was able to come in and unload. And that was kind of at the peak of COVID. But, it was really reinforced for me how vulnerable the supply chain is to even the smallest disruption and what those impacts can be. Now, in his case, the impact was just he had to wait and he had more time to do all the parting. So I think ultimately worked out for him. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're waiting for something that's absolutely critical to you, to your business, that's a problem. And it's one of the things that technology, I think, is kind of revolutionizing as we look at all of the different companies that have sprung up that are doing kind of that full end to end life cycle of the supply chain and of freight.
Well, yeah, and it says something that just that we as ordinary an ordinary citizen, an ordinary person can, for I don't know, I'm not familiar with the exact price of an Apple AirTag, but I think it's like $50-$60 or something. That for as little as that, you can just track your own shipment and see and see whether they're doing what they told they would. So that says something about the where technology is in terms of managing supply chains.
People care about that so much these days, whether it's
Yeah.
traceability, sustainability. The efficiency is very important, but people want to know and want to track these things. If you look at Amazon's flagship consumer product in their app that is on everybody's phone, probably in the world, uh,
Hmm.
where your package is at every point in time that it's traveling to you. And they offer a suite of tools to move things around. If you want to pick it up in an Amazon store instead, that level of engagement on the consumer interface is pretty big. And we see that, across all of our customers and partners, they're thinking about how do they provide a differentiated advantage? How do they do something that, is more than just moving your goods from point to point, because people want to know what's going on. And, I think that ties back into what we're doing with automation outside of the four walls and
Yeah.
off of the highway, because those are spaces that traditionally I don't think a lot of people get to see. If you asked a gathering of 100 people who has been on a massive global port and seen the keys and the shingle and understands how containers move off and on of to ships, whether it's roll on, roll off, or crane operations,
Hmm.
very few of them understand the complexity of those operations and the criticality of getting everything right.
Yeah.
And if you're a massive global freight shipper who wants to track all these things, you need pretty advanced technology in order to do it. And I mean, we're watching an industry transform from spreadsheets into applications that you've got
Hmm.
RFID tags, or you're scanning containers. You've got sensors now on vehicles and on trailers. All of these things are advancing very rapidly, and this is an industry that is working very hard to modernize and to do it with infrastructure that hasn't necessarily modernized at the same speed. So it's kind of an interesting world when you say to yourself, we look at airline connections from a tractor to a trailer. That actual connection is like 1920s technology, but we're
Yeah.
still using it today because number
Yeah.
one, it works. Number two, there are millions of trailers with those old style connectors out there,
Yeah.
and nobody is incentivized to change them. So as we see like this revolution towards how do we automate that airline connection, I think you're going to see a lot more movement there, because the trailer is kind of the atomic unit of freight once it comes out of a container.
Yeah.
And containers, I don't think I don't know if smart containers are going to be as big of a thing, because I think the appeal of a container is that it serves its purpose and it doesn't have to be smart. You can,
No.
if you have incredibly valuable cargo, you can seal it in a more secure way or something like that. But the technology, unless you're talking about like refrigerated cargo or climate
Hmm.
controlled, I don't think requires the same as once you get onto a road. Once you come off that ship, it changes.
Yeah, and it makes more sense to make sure that the sensors are on the goods instead of on the container, because the container is less important. It's important that you know where the goods are.
Yeah, it's critical. That's one of the things that I learned, in my journey into the commercial logistics space, was how big a deal seals on trailers and containers are.
Yeah.
I've talked to shippers who've said, "Hey, if you can help me to better secure my load, via autonomy or via other enabling technologies within an autonomous system, we're worried about, when a seal gets busted, the load is essentially done."
Yeah.
And that's why our partnership with Truck Specialized Information Services and their other entity, Truck Specialized Parking Services,
Yeah.
exists, right? They were providing these secure truck ports for these loads that were coming off of intermodal railheads,
Yeah.
or just drivers who were looking for a safe place to park. And we see that as just another kind of chain in the logistics ecosystem.
Now you're saying something interesting that I would like to know a little bit more about, because you were talking about a move from military to civilian logistics. Maybe a little bit about your background in that sense, and why why you see a difference, because apparently you got into logistics through the military.
That's right. So I started my career in the military in the Marine Corps in North America, in the U.S. Marine Corps' Field Artillery Corps, that is a part of their warfighting functions.
Hmm.
Artillery is a logistics heavy job.
Yeah.
Artillery is, a battery unit that has 6 cannons in it, has 36 trucks. And these are not just,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, you think about hauling the ammo, moving the troops that operate the systems,
Yeah.
towing the cannons, all of the logistics and other classes of supply. You have all of these essentially Class 8 trucks. Most of them are kind of unified chassis. They don't have trailers, but the pintle is where it gets hooked
Hmm.
onto the cannon tube, at least with the systems that we operated.
Yeah.
But I grew up with logistics being the language that I spoke in order to do my primary job, which was directing the fire of cannons in support of ground maneuver. And it was ingrained in me very quickly. You can't shoot, you can't move, and you can't communicate unless you have the logistics chain that supports that, for ammunition,
Yeah.
for food, sustainment, medical supplies, fuel, all of the things that go into that, batteries for your radios. Now they're doing some really great things with, on the ground power generating capabilities that are more sustainable. Uh, but I came from that world, and when I moved over into cyberspace operations for a while, and was working, once I retired from the Marine Corps, working in the private industry space, still working with the government, I
Hmm.
missed having a system that I could go. I missed Monday mornings. We would all go to the motor pool, and everybody would be working on their trucks. Everybody would be doing preventative maintenance checks and
Yeah. Yeah.
services, and ensuring that they were ready for whatever was going on that week. um, I really came back to that. I said, what do I want to do with the next kind of phase of my career? And it all comes down to logistics. When
Yeah.
you're transitioning out of the military, they tell you, you could do all of these different things. But one of the things that I learned in translating it is that operations in the military
Hmm.
and operations in the commercial world are very different. When I think of operations in the commercial world, it's pure logistics. It's the
Yes.
things that make you able to go and do business, to deliver value, to kind of change the world. And that's why I came back into the logistics field. I had a couple of very close friends that I served in the Marine Corps with, who reached out and said, "Hey, we're going to go and join this robotics company. that does really interesting military things. They have a burgeoning commercial business, and we'd like you to lead it. And I said, I've never really done true commercial stuff before, but at the end of the day, it's mission focused, just like everything else that I've done. Get something from here to here and do it efficiently, do it in a way that builds trust and transparency into the system and build relationships, right? Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who can move goods from point A to point B, but you're always going to pick the people that you like, right? The people that you're able to work with, can do the job, but also are trustworthy. And for me, coming into this industry and getting to understand all of the different kind of corners of it, from the intermodal spaces to kind of the middle mile where we're not focused today, was fascinating. So.
So Gabe, I don't have any military experience myself, but I always wonder about one thing. So if you look at commercial logistics and you look at military logistics, what can commercial logistics learn from what happens in military logistics?
Yeah, that's a great question, Martijn. So I think the key here is that the military is very good at logistics. If you look at the Second World War, all of the combatants, it was the combatants who were able to produce the most material and transport that material to the battlefields that were able to win. Just a massive material. Now, the logistics kind of professionals that grew out of that era realized that airlift was critical. If you ask somebody what the most incredible weapon, instrument of national power that a nation can wield today, maybe some of them would say nuclear weapons or an aircraft carrier. I actually think it's the cargo plane. I think I look at the C-130, the C-17, the C-5 Galaxy, which one of my mission operations leads used to fly, which can have 4 M1 tanks that are 68 tons apiece, roll on and roll off of. That is the key. It's the ability to project force and deliver a force package to a place. That is no different than what we do in commercial logistics. It's the same idea. How do you get things from point A to point B? When speed is of the essence, there's obviously air freight. But when, economics are of the essence, which they always are, when you're talking about the global, supply chain and, how logistics fuels our economies, seaborne freight and then ground operated freight are pretty critical. That's the same kind of behaviors. So we look at what we were doing, for the military. We had developed this end-to-end technology stack, everything from sensor integrations, compute, localization, precision navigation and timing, all of the drive-by-wire actuation and controls. We said, how does this apply to the commercial world? How can we take what we're doing here and apply it to commercial industry and solve problems for them as well? And as we did the market analysis, we kept coming back to logistics and commercial logistics, where it looks just like what we're doing for the military, right? We're in this off-highway space, and the off-highway space is really, I hate that term. It's really hard to define, and I hate defining what we do by talking about what we don't do. But where there are no roads, where there are unimproved road surfaces, where there are no lane lines. If you ever go to a port on a container exchange route, there may be some lane lines that people follow, but if you go and you watch the ins and outs and everybody kind of doing their thing, it's more like a dogfight in the air, than what you would expect heavy logistics vehicles to be doing on the ground. And that's the same kind of behaviors that we've built into our military autonomy stack. So as we brought our commercial autonomy stack and our military autonomy stack together into a unified platform, and all of the engineering that goes into them, if the military wants to develop, a better dust filtering perception capability, the commercial side benefits from that. If the commercial side says, hey, we really want to tighten up the tolerances for how we're, autonomously reversing with a single trailer or a double articulated trailer, the military side benefits from that. All of those things kind of compound in the same stack. And we look at that as, one of the key differentiators from a lot of the competitors that are out there, we started doing the defense stuff, which is harder. The
Mm-hmm.
true 3 or 4 dimensional spaces where there are no roads, rules of the road don't exist. And it's kind of like adversarial autonomy. Will you run into a moose on a resource road up in Quebec?
Yeah.
Will you run into, if you're operating in the desert, a protected turtle species, which definitely exist on military bases in the US? We want to be able to see all of that. And that led to
Yeah.
our kind of approach to dynamic path planning and how we do perception. But it's the same thing. What we do for FP Innovations and their customers in Quebec is the same thing that we're doing for the US Army. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing that we're doing for the US Marine Corps. Those behaviors vary a little bit. Certainly the cargo that you're carrying can be different. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And being able to have, commonality across those different use cases is really critical to building an efficient, scalable business.
So if I take like the two complete opposites, two complete opposites. So on the one hand, there's an autonomous military vehicle that just moves around any terrain. So that's really really random with almost no rules, which I guess that makes it really complicated. And on the other side, we have autonomous vehicles moving through a city. Is it then a correct assumption that in essence, moving through a city is much easier than moving into undefined terrain?
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there is an easier button, right, when it comes to moving
Yeah.
in a city vice mixed terrain, but from a risk acceptance and risk mitigation perspective, right?
Yeah.
When we think about how we go from an on the moon setting, right? You think
Mm-hmm.
about Volvo Autonomous Solutions is a great example of this. VAS has
Yeah.
this operation at the Branoy chalk mine where they have all of these electric FH cab over engine autonomous trucks running.
Mm-hmm.
That is like an on the moon setting. They've pulled the driver out, which is incredible. They're the first to do it commercially. But they have created this, they found this operational design domain. We talk about where we run as in terms of ODDs, but they found this ODD where it's the moon. How do you
Mm-hmm.
then recreate that? How do you then tweak that so that you can do it not on the moon?
So I have a question. So
Sure.
with the moon, you mean? If we would put like a vehicle on the moon, you can do whatever you want because there's not going to be a pedestrian or anything else. Is that what you mean?
It is, and I'll get a little bit more into that. So as I think about kind of the sliding scale of severity and risk,
Yeah.
the X and Y axis are risk and exposure, right? As your
Yes.
exposure goes up, your risk goes up, and it's the same thing for your interactions with we call pedestrians vulnerable road users,
Yes.
because once you're in a car, you're less vulnerable, risk goes down,
Yeah.
speed risk goes up, but
Yeah.
once you're in another commercial truck. If two commercial trucks collide below 25 miles an hour, there's going to be damage, but the odds of both of those drivers or the passengers, if there are passengers in those vehicles walking
Mm-hmm.
away, is pretty good.
Yeah.
Uh, just the same way that if a truck, a Class 8 heavy commercial truck collided with a passenger car, right? You've got big, heavy thing, smaller thing, more risk there. So we try to
Yeah.
build this out as we work through where we're going to operate and how we expand and grow the operating domains where and when we're ready to pull a driver out and go fully autonomous with remote operation supervisors. We want to make those decisions responsibly, and we want to make those decisions the right way. We think that it's much more challenging to do it in a city.
Mm-hmm.
And I applaud the robo taxi companies that are out there and are doing this today, and that's their business model. We could just never understand how to make that model close. In terms of putting that much hardware and software, which has a significant bill of materials cost, onto a vehicle. How do you then recapture that and actually build
Yeah.
a profitable business? We focused on
Mm-hmm.
the other spaces. Also, operating in cities. I'll give a shout out to Gatic because they're doing this, and I've never seen their safety case, but I know them, and they're very responsible and doing a great job. They're operating today in mixed traffic with pedestrians, and it's incredible. The future is now, but the big challenge and kind of the gap is the regulatory kind of landscape. For us, where we are operating today and where we're focused on for the near term are spaces where the regulatory environment is controlled by the people who own those spaces. They are not public roads, or they're semi-public, semi-private roads, resource roads in Canadian forests. All of these spaces are controllable. And we think that
you mentioned ports, right?
Yeah.
Ports are also large areas that are usually under the control of the Port Authority, and it's much easier to create spaces there that are relatively safe to operate an autonomous vehicle, in the sense that there are no pedestrians.
Yes. The lack of pedestrians there, the fact that, if you take a site and it has a fence, you can go end to end autonomously with a lot less risk. And we think our technology is pretty mature, and our customers and partners agree, but we don't want to unnecessarily expose ourselves, our customers, other people, the motoring public to risk until we've built a lot of confidence in what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's been our approach. We feel like we have a real responsibility to, not just the general society and the people whose freight we carry, and the partners whose vehicles we do it in with, it doesn't say Forterra on the front of the trucks. Those are the things that really matter to us. But we also have a responsibility to every other AV company that's out there, every other robotics company and roboticist that's, at a university and are automating, their first RC car and figuring out, how do we make this thing make its own decisions, and how do we use perception and control systems? We want to build confidence in the entire sector because we think it's going to change the face of logistics, and we want to be responsible citizens in that, functional area. So that kind of colors how we think about this. But to tie it all back, it's the same in defense. If you're an autonomous vehicle, whether it's one of the small multi-purpose equipment transport kind of 8-wheel skid steer vehicles that the Army is experimenting with, and just announced that they were changing formations to include as part of their table of organization and equipment as like the atomic unit of maneuver. Squads will now have these little SMETs that will be a part of their kind of their basic equipment package, and it'll carry supplies. It'll lower the cognitive burden and the physical burden on humans. And we think that that applies directly to the commercial spaces too. If you look at ports specifically, where they have automated cranes or autostrads or reacher stackers, there's still a human somewhere in the loop in most of those. And, organized labor, the Teamsters have done a great job of this, of ensuring that they've kept humans supervising these things, because there's a role for that too. But that human robotic teaming, it's not taking jobs. It's allowing us to do more efficiently. It's going to change the nature of jobs, but it's going to allow us to be more efficient and, to move more freight through our supply chain. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, the story I told about the Porsche sitting off the coast, waiting to come into the Port of Baltimore because they're, they weren't ready for them to unload. When you talk about kind of those disruptions to the supply chain, if you can move more freight through it more efficiently, then everybody wins. And I think that's a critical factor here too, is the things we're doing on defense and the things we're doing on commercial. It's all about how do we do it better, and how do we, take humans out of dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs.
Yeah. So looking at the first areas where you see your autonomous vehicles operating, you were already talking about like forests, because those are so I'm guessing that's hauling equipment or moving trees and things like that. Are there also more, how do I say this, like more urban type areas where you would where you already see applications? I'm thinking ports. I'm thinking maybe large drayage yards or things like that.
Absolutely. So, today we're operating at a truck port in downtown Detroit. We are working with the city of Detroit and with the owner of the property, who's our great customer, TSIS, as well as with the nearby railhead that they service. What they've done is they've built these truck ports. So when a train comes in and all of these containers get pulled off the train, they get stacked. And if you don't clear that stack before the next train comes in, because this is a continuous process, containers get buried and nobody gets their Porsches. But you get this, this flow of containers that constantly come off the lot. And in this setting, they can only run from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. over this 1.6 mile drayage run. The speed limit is 35 miles an hour. It's a 2-lane road in either direction. It's big, it's wide. There's lots of space around it. And today, what manual drivers would do before we had implemented our solution, manual drivers would pick up a container on a chassis and bring that down this street, drop it off at this truck port where you can park for the night and be safe, but also you can just get these things staged. This allows drivers who are going to take them over the road to pull in, to hook to, they know that, they're going to spot 3 and they're picking up this trailer, they scan it and they go. Today, how we've kind of optimized that, instead of having manual drivers come down, pull in, find a place to park it, we've organized the lot. We've gotten them about 25% more capacity within, their lot that they have. And we're doing that by optimizing what's happening internally with autonomy. So now manual drivers will pull in, they'll drop the trailer load that they have, they'll pull right back out the gate and go get another one. Autonomous Kalmar terminal tractor will pull up, hook to it, bring it to the spot that it's been tasked to do it, and it parks it much closer. The parking is much more precise. When you don't have to have somebody, going around or, going out and maneuvering between trailer bodies, you're doing much better and you can optimize your space. But then they're able to work outside of the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And they're able to do this reorganization of the lot, knowing that, hey, this trailer body and, this trailer are getting picked up first. Let's move things around. And, these are not getting picked up until next week. Move them to the back. So this type of organization is where we're going. How do we do the end-to-end pieces and add the drayage run, right? It's public roads. So we could do it with driver in, but we're working with the city of Detroit to put some controls in place so that everybody's happy with it. And they're very excited about it. The innovation ecosystem there is pretty significant, and they're making a huge investment in the connected vehicle and all of the connected system technology. But from there, it's connecting it to the railhead as well, right? How do we autonomously do all of the things and do it on both ends of it while we work through public roads? And I think the right customers, the right partners, everybody thinks about this and says, great, we're fingerprinting this. We're doing this here. We can do this in other places. And then that in between public road drayage run, is the next step. Now there's another operation that we did a really successful pilot this past fall. I can't go into details on who the customer was, but we operated about a 1.8 mile drayage run from a production facility to a warehousing facility. And we did this in mixed traffic. We had, safety drivers in, but we ran autonomously and we achieved about a 93% successful run rate. Now, of those, 7% that were not successful runs, where there was a manual intervention, every single one of them, none of them were for safety reasons. We had set rules because we were operating in a space and we wanted to showcase the autonomy, and we put all of these controls in place. One of the rules we set was don't cross the double yellow line in autonomous mode. So the manual driver, the safety driver would take over and go around, a broken down truck or a construction site. But we consider those to be interventions because the data is important to us, right? We do pilots and, demonstrations like that because we want to learn. We want to, get exposed to edge cases. One of the edge cases that we were exposed to was geese migrating south for the winter, and hundreds and hundreds of geese providing, these occlusions for all of the sensors. And the truck detected them. It didn't know what it was. So the truck said, hey, I'm going to slow down and stop because I don't know what, I'm either being attacked. It's a Hitchcock movie. There's birds coming at me. Or this is just something that, is a non-standard condition. And we're not going to try and go through it. Where a manual driver might see that and say, hey, these are good eating. If I hit one, it's, not going to be a problem. I'll stop on the way back when it stops moving. So that's kind of how we're thinking about this. But those drayage runs in, contained spaces where today you don't have public access or you can mitigate access, those are places where we can go kind of end to end today. The future, as we kind of expand, we have a great partnership with Kalmar, who manufactures they have the biggest market share of terminal tractors globally. Our partnership with them is focused on being able to deliver a system that will have a factory level OEM safety case, a factory warranty. We think that there's a lot of people doing incredible things in this space. But one of the ways that, we would differentiate is to be scalable, right? It's great if you can go build one of one and go show that it works. Now go put 1,000 of them out there and put them out there in a way that they don't need 4 or 5 people supporting each truck or supporting each site. That's how you scale. And that's the critical thing for us, because if you don't scale, these are science projects, right? And because logistics is so critical, you need to get to the density of vehicles operating to have an impact. If you were to automate, one port, let's say you started with the Port of Antwerp and you built out all of these different container exchange routes autonomously operating with, 400 or 500 autonomous trucks, you've made a significant impact, but nobody is prepared to do that today. And I don't think, that you get to that density of vehicles that are in the market operating until you have the ability to scale off of a production line.
Yeah. So if I would ask you to look ahead, and I'm not going to hold you to it. So I'm going to ask you to dream a little bit as well. So like 10, 20 years ahead, what's gonna happen in the autonomous space? Where are you guys going to be? And if there's like a dream, you can just say, well, we think we're going to be here, but we really want to go there. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of critical parts to this, right? In my dream state, we're the sole autonomy provider for major commercial logistics operators, and are the most respected, trusted name in the deployment of commercial autonomy.
But what are the vehicles doing, and where are they operating?
Yeah, so I think in a few years we'll be in unconstrained operations, and I say unconstrained operations because today we're operating autonomously with mitigations for safety. Part of that regulatory landscape is that there is no agreed upon, hey, this is what safe is, right? It's kind of like the reasonable person test for safety, which I don't love. It's, hey, we think we're safe enough. Our partners agree. We have insurers who are going to buy our liability case and work with us to do it. And then you're safe. There is no, hey, this is the automotive standard for operating an autonomous Class 8 truck on highways in the United States. It's a state by state thing. And that's why we're focused on these more constrained spaces now, because we think that's where the market is for the next 5+ years. We think that, it's going to be harder to scale those things outside of some of the very specific lanes that are running already today in Texas, where they're making great progress, by the way. I mean, we believe that a rising tide raises all boats, and we want the autonomy industry to succeed. So when people succeed, we cheer it, even if they're our competitors. And when people don't and do something that, maybe exposes the motoring public to risk, we kind of cringe, because we don't want that to happen. We want people to trust that this is being done the right way. And without the regulatory kind of guidepost, it's a little harder.
we could go on for hours like this, because there's so much to talk about when it comes to this. Even good things come to an end. So I'm just at this point gonna thank you for teaching me so much, also about the military logistics and that impact, and just educating us on where we're going with autonomous vehicles. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Martijn, it was great to chat. Long-time listener, excited to be on the podcast, and I look forward to the next time we get to speak.
Thank you for listening to Does Logistics Matter? For more on trends and innovation in supply chain and logistics, visit our blog at logisticsmatter.com. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, please send an email to podcast@logisticsmatter.com. This podcast was produced by Dimitry VleugelThe. The music is based on a sample by Ragaman and produced by Michael Spengler. This episode was powered by Forterra. Forterra is a leading provider of autonomous systems for ground-based movement in the working world. They deploy advanced autonomous capabilities to commercial and industrial organizations that share a vision for improved efficiency, reduced cost, and greater safety on the ground. For more information, visit forterra.com.